Okay, let's get started. Let's try to get started. Thank you for bringing problem set 4 up to the front. And thank you for writing your section times on problem set 4. Life for Dariush becomes much, much easier if we have section times written on problem set 4 than if we don't. Now, what do people think about problem set 4? Problem set 4 had a lot of questions in its second half that were the same question with slightly different numbers. And I'm curious what people thought of having to spend a good chunk of their Wednesday evening when the rain and hail were pouring down outside dealing with that. I oscillate back and forth between thinking that the right problem set is one that exposes you to every concept only once, so that you've at least seen the kinds of problems we hope that you can analyze before, and the right problem set is something that makes you do all the problems enough times that it's engraved on your neurons in such a way that you'll have a difficult time forgetting about it. Too much and just enough, and only 4 brave people who want problem sets that can challenge them more. And this is, I think, as it should be. Berkeley workloads are relatively high, and Berkeley students are spending a lot of time outside the classroom doing other things. So we'll take that in mind. Problem set 5 is due February 24th, and once again, write your section time on the front. Problem set 5 is now up on the World Wide Web and easily accessible. The commercial, that is, I've been thinking for a while, and the outside Political Economy Review Committee agrees, which is nice because it means I can actually assemble some money to support it, that there's not enough of getting political economy majors together in outside the classroom settings to hear what the people who are teaching their courses are thinking about when they're not standing up in front of them teaching their courses. So I'm going to launch the Berkeley Friday Political Economy Colloquium in this brand new, nice-looking building up on North Side, half of which is new and half of which is the refurbished and now earthquake-safe Naval Architecture building. I would like to greatly acknowledge the kind sponsorship of the Political Economy major, the Blum Center on Developing Economies, and the Institute for New Economic Thinking through the Berkeley Economic History Lab for making it possible to grab this space. That is the plaza level of the Blum Center, on the part of the building on the left, down to the concrete plaza. And we'll assemble people together to talk about the idea of austerity, that public policy should be austere in the context of the global economic downturn. I'm going to insist on my prerogative as chair of the major to stand up in front and talk first, but I'm largely just going to pose the puzzle. And then we'll have 2 stalwarts who have been teaching in interdisciplinary studies around UC Berkeley for quite a while, and thinking about these issues for quite a while, speak briefly. Joe Lau from the Political Economy major, author of, among other things, Max Weber and the Persistence of Religion, and Rakesh Bhandari, who's now currently teaching the interdisciplinary studies major. He used to teach in rhetoric, author of, among other things, Slavery and Wage Labor in History. The 3 of us are going to blather for about half an hour. We're going to take questions, and then if there are no questions, comment for about half an hour, and then we're going to have some food. I'm not sure how much food or how long it will last, but we'll have some. And hopefully this will run until 4 o'clock. It's an experiment. I'll be happier if lots of people come and it works. And with respect to our speakers, how many of you have taken a course from Joe Lau? How many of you people know who he is? So, all right, that looks to be, people seem to have made up their minds. Oh, good, 26 Joe students. That's excellent. I won't say that that's the right answer, but that's good to see. There is no right answer for this course. And how many of you have taken a course from Rakesh? This is unlikely because there are fewer interdisciplinary studies or rhetoric majors in this class. But he tends to teach Joe-like stuff, but to do so in one of those alternative majors. Oh, wow, virtually no one's gotten to his courses. That's too bad because he's extremely energetic, very thoughtful, and very good. He's a nice resource we have around here. And how many have taken another course from me, simply for symmetry? I think I asked this question before in the first lecture, but I couldn't find the results collated. Yep, okay. And this disturbs me, because I'd hope that if you weren't going to be an econ major, and if you took Econ 1 last semester, that you'd be following on and taking some other econ course this semester, because it is an important set of skills and knowledge and discipline to get exposed to. But those are the breaks. And if this Berkeley kind of political economy colloquium works, we're going to have a bunch of these. So here are a bunch of people who've been around the political economy major for quite a while. Which of them would you most like me to see if I can persuade them to come and give a very short talk on Friday afternoon? If you don't know who the people are, you probably don't want them to come and talk. There are enough people who you do know if you want to come and talk. Okay. Dariush does not quite beat Ananya. Yeah. We'll see if we can do both. And get Alan Karras and Beth Crawford and Shannon Stimson up here as well. Okay, so with that as warm-up, let's once again remind ourselves of where we are. Where we are is we're using the income expenditure model to try to calculate the level of aggregate demand in an economy so that we can then know what its level of production and income is, and that'll then help us tell us what the unemployment rate is, whether the economy is doing well or poorly, whether it needs to have its level of activity and spending heated up or cooled down. In order to do so, we use this income expenditure master equation. And once again, people are all over the place. I think, if I remember this right, 7, 9, 11, I think the answer is actually supposed to be E this time. But few enough people got it that I'm now quite unsure of myself. Let's look and see. Oops, this is the wrong slide, the wrong answer slide. C plus I plus G plus GX, the 4 autonomous components of aggregate demand at the top. We said that C0, the baseline level of consumption depending on consumer confidence, was 5 trillion. I, G, and GX are each 2 trillion. Yeah, I can't edit this. Well, so that gives us... So what that'll do is that will give us... let's add a text box to here. That will give us Y equal to 5 trillion from the benchmark level of consumer spending, plus 2 trillion for investment, plus 2 trillion for government purchases, plus 2 trillion for net exports. That's going to give us 11 trillion on the denominator of this equation, on the numerator of this equation. The denominator is 1 minus, and then you have to take 1 minus the tax rate to see what's left in households, pockets for them to spend after the taxes have come out, and that's 0.25, a 25% tax rate. And we said an 80% marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income, and we had a 10% propensity to import. That then gives us 11 trillion in the numerator, and 1 minus 0.06 Once you multiply 0.75 by 0.08, 1 minus 0.06 plus 0.01 gives us 0.5 in the denominator, which should give us 22 trillion. So the right answer was indeed E, 22 trillion. And everyone was expecting something else, I think, because they didn't see this big honking 5 trillion back there. Exam is going to be a lot easier if you can actually calculate using this equation pretty quickly. And I'd say life afterwards is going to be somewhat easier. At least you'll be able to surprise people if you're able to give back-of-the-envelope estimates of how big shifts in consumer confidence are likely to have in terms of their effects on total spending relatively quickly as well. And let me save that because I had the wrong slide in there. Bingo. Yep. All the devils are here. You should be reading it. We should be talking about it in section. Say, fair game for the midterm is going to be all the chapters up through 15. We're going to ask some questions about the chapters up through the first half, or the first two-thirds of the book up through chapter 15, and all the devils are here, and then save the rest of the book for the final. Midterm is going to be Thursday, March 10th for the first midterm, provided that Thursday, March 10th is actually a Thursday, which I think it is. That's going to come at a very natural breakpoint in our syllabus, if I've managed to figure out how fast I will talk correctly. But once again, by now you should have read the first 5 chapters at least, or skimmed them, which tell you about the origins of securitization. Now the question of why would investors think that taking a whole bunch of mortgages and massing them together in bonds would make sense. Why would an investor buy such a thing, since you don't know what it is? But after all, if a bank wants to make a mortgage and hold a mortgage, it then sends out an appraiser. And the appraiser looks at the house, and the appraiser makes a report. And someone in the bank looks at the report and says, is this house really something we want to invest in, which is what we're doing. And what do people say? People say diversification. Okay, excellent. That's the answer that people gave when saying why they were buying mortgages, why they were buying mortgage-backed securities, why they thought that these things that Wall Street had created were things that they were withholding. Very much that you want to have all of your eggs in different baskets. Don't put all your eggs in one basket principle. As opposed to the alternative principle of put all your eggs in one basket and then watch the basket very carefully. The idea was C. D is also there. That simply if you have a piece of property that's easy to sell, that's worth more than a piece of property that isn't easy to sell. And the investment bankers promised that mortgage-backed securities would be easy to sell. B is a good reason for investment bankers to try to convince people to buy mortgage-backed securities. It's not a terribly good reason. It's not a terribly good reason for someone to actually buy and hold one of these things if you're paying large fees to investment bankers. And A is much more a public policy measure. That is, it's been a kind of policy since of the United States government since World War II. That it's good to expand the scale of the mortgage industry. That it's good to decrease the cost of the mortgage industry. That it's good to make it relatively easy for Americans to buy their houses. Because a country in which people buy their houses is a country in which people care a lot about their neighborhoods and care a lot about maintaining the houses they own. While in a country of renters, you can always move out and you're not on the hook for very long and you don't really care about what happens to the building in 5 or 10 years. The belief is that a property-owning democracy, an ownership society with a high rate of home ownership, is going to be, in political economy sense, much sounder and safer and more secure than a society of a few landlords and a lot of renters. This may or may not be true. This has been a powerful political argument in America for the past 70 years or so. And that's the public policy reason why policymakers in the late 1990s and early 2000s looked upon the growth of mortgage securitization with, by and large, with approval. That they argued you're going to get a whole bunch of people who not normally make mortgage loans, making them indirectly. This is going to lower interest rates and lower the cost of buying a home to Americans. That's a good thing. Yes, there are dangers of overspeculation and a financial crisis, but the Federal Reserve knows how to handle those. It's now working very, very well. This is a risk worth running. And it turned out in retrospect, I think, to be a risk not worth running, and we're still trying to figure out why. Recapitulations, once again, I think I may drop this section next time, it's getting tired. But I do want you to know how much world GDP has grown over the past 10,000 years. I do want you to know that the unemployment rate, seasonally adjusted, is 9%. And I would like you to be able to at least talk intelligently at cocktail parties about why we may not totally trust the Bureau of Labor Statistics seasonal adjustment procedures here and now. What is potentially wrong with the seasonal adjustment procedures that they used, which transforms a rise in the actual unemployment rate from 9.1 to 9.8% between December 12th and January 12th into a decline in seasonally adjusted unemployment from 9.4% down to 9%. Yeah, and people are uneasy with C, which is the right answer. Assumption A, that in normal times fewer people are at work in January than in December, is certainly indefinitely true. Retail and also shipping and handling take big crashes after the end of the Christmas selling season. As I say, we really don't want to have all you extra people around. We won't have work for you for another 9 or 10 months. Go off and find something else to do. And there are so many people thrown onto the labor market from retail, from transportation and delivery, and also from the shutting down of construction in the Northeast and the Midwest when the snow comes, that the economy hasn't been able to figure out a way to deal with that by absorbing that increase in labor without a rise in unemployment. Here's the question why. You'd think there'd be lots of economic activities that have to be performed sometime, but not during any special time of the year. And so there'd be companies that would specialize in taking activities that don't have to be performed in a particular month and saying, hey, let's do them. Let's hire a whole bunch of people and do them in January. It'll be relatively cheap to hire them because they'll be out looking for jobs anyway. They'll be grateful. They'll work hard. We'll have low costs. We'll make a bunch of profits. Doesn't seem to work. We get the seasonal business cycle year in and year out, no matter what adjustments are made. It's somewhat of a mystery. And you've got Say's law, and it's breaking. You've got the single economic growth equation, and by now you've seen this magic equation for dealing with situations of depression, enough that you should be seeing it in your sleep. And the last thing we've covered so far I want you to remember is the link between Say's law and our income expenditure model comes through the kind of Jean-Baptiste Say, John Stuart Mill principle that the only time you have to worry about there being too little demand in an economy is when there's too great a demand for financial assets. That is, an excess demand for financial assets, a planned savings by households greater than the planned rate of creation of financial assets for households to hold by government and businesses. That causes trouble because an excess demand for financial assets is going to mean deficient demand for currently produced goods and services. And thus that if you get that there'll be downward pressure on the flow of spending, incomes, and production if planned savings is greater than planned investment, and no pressure, upward or downward, on spending, output, production, sales, if planned savings is equal to planned investment. Well, what happens if we set planned savings equal to planned investment, or the planned savings rate of accumulation of financial assets by domestic consumers on the right-hand side equal to the planned rate of creation of financial assets on the left? Investment spending, that's what businesses are creating in the way of financial assets, either by taking out loans, selling bonds, or taking retained earnings and pouring them back into the business, and so raising the value of the stocks of people they own. G minus T, government purchases minus taxes. These are the bonds that the government has to issue in order to pay its bills. These are the financial assets that are created. And for that, you then need to say set those equal to savings by households, plus the net inflow of dollars from foreigners looking to invest their money in the United States, looking to save their money in some form where it's tied to the features of the United States. So this is the equation for balance in financial markets, for planned savings to be equal to planned investment, for there to be no excess demand for financial assets. When we played this with this equation, we noticed there were T's on both sides. We moved the net export and the consumption both over to the left-hand side. And what we got out at the end, was our national income identity. Our definition of what real GDP was as the sum of consumption spending by households, investment purchases by businesses, government purchases by governments, and net exports. And that told us where we wanted to be. That told us that when production is equal to sales and there are no unplanned shifts in inventories, then planned savings are equal to planned investment and there's no excess demand or supply for financial assets. So you can say either that the economy is in balance. When planned, there's no pressure on the overall level of spending when planned savings is equal to planned investment, and thus that when planned savings is ahead of planned investment, planned spending is less than income, and so both fall. Or you can say that when production is greater than sales, inventories undergo an unplanned jump, and then businesses fire workers, and so both production and incomes fall. Those are both equivalent. Those are both ways of breaking Say's hope that there would be no deficient demand in the economy as a whole. You can look at it either way. It's nice to have it out there. It's nice to remember that you can look at it either way. That's the connection between something going wrong in the financial markets in terms of net demand or supply for savings vehicles, and something going wrong in the product markets in terms of excess supply of currently produced goods and services. But now let's head on, and starting from our magic depression economics equation. Here we have an equation for telling us what the level of real GDP in the economy is going to be. And it depends on a whole bunch of things having to do with the economic environment. We'd like to get from this equation to one that's going to be somewhat more useful to us, which would be to tell us what the level of real GDP in an economy is going to be as a function of the economic environment and also as a function of economic policy. In economic policy, as far as it affects the level of output in depression situations when we're talking about business cycles. Economic policy then comes in two flavors. There's fiscal policy. The government can increase its purchases or perhaps reduce its tax rate, but that's more complicated. We'll put that to one side. We'll focus mostly on fiscal policy as increases in government purchases in this course. And there's monetary policy. The Federal Reserve pushing interest rates in financial markets up or down, which it can do within limits, and later we'll see what those limits are. We'd like to have a nice equation that would have a bunch of terms that represent what's happening in the economic environment and what's happening outside the country. Some terms that tell us how the federal government's fiscal policy, how Congress's spending decisions are affecting the overall level of production right now. And we'd like to have a bunch of terms that tell us how monetary policy, how the Federal Reserve's interventions to change the interest rates at which people and businesses and the government can borrow and lend are affecting the level of GDP today. And so that's the task for today, to try to build up from this income expenditure model to what economists have since 1937 called an investment savings equation to detail how government's actions affect the flow of investment and savings and thus the level of real GDP. As I said before last time, we're also going to look at changes relative to baselines. We're going to put a lot of capital deltas into our equations just so that we can have simpler formulas, so we aren't carrying an extra 18 terms around that don't change. And also, to diminish terms, we're going to define autonomous spending as the sum of these four components of aggregate demand that don't depend on income: investment, gross exports, government purchases, that component of consumption spending that depends on consumer confidence. The rest of spending, that proportion of consumer spending that depends on income on the one hand and imports on the other, do depend on income. That's not autonomous to the determination of income, but we want to focus on just those that are, so we can calculate what they are, and then calculate what income, spending, and real GDP are without worrying about feedbacks, from changes in real GDP to changes in income, which would then change this stuff. We want our arrow of causation to run only one way. So we call the sum of these four the change in autonomous spending, and get this much simpler. The change in real GDP, or the difference in real GDP from baseline, is the difference of autonomous spending from baseline divided by these multiplier terms. Now we're going to want to unpack autonomous spending. That C0, the baseline level of consumption, is determined by consumer confidence. G, government purchases, is determined by politics, and so we'll throw that over to the political scientists to determine. But we have investment, and we have gross exports. And while the government picks G, it's part of its policy, it doesn't directly pick investment or gross exports. But both investment and gross exports are at least partially determined by the interest rate, which the Federal Reserve either controls or influences, depending on how optimistic the Federal Reserve is about what it does. So we've got to unpack the determination of investment and of exports. For investment, as I said last time, we're going to say that investment spending is determined by business confidence and also the cost of capital to businesses, the long-term risky real interest rate. And exports are determined by foreigners' incomes and by the real exchange rate, epsilon, the value of the home currency. When the home currency is expensive, foreigners aren't going to buy very many of our exports because then something quoted as $600 is actually a lot of renminbi or yen or baht or euros or pounds. While when our currency is worth less, it can be an amazing deal. The first time that my wife and I ever took a substantial trip to England, it was during the Reagan administration.